Indiana back on the hardwood tonight as they will host Kennesaw State in their final non-conference tilt before jumping in back into Big Ten play, I guess I should say, next week on the road at Nebraska. I've been saying for the last couple of days, I expect that Xavier Johnson will play tonight. I don't know that if he does, that if he'll how much he would play, but I think that if he's ready, that they would certainly like to see him before they jump into Big Ten play.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not positive he plays. I do, the mood music around it certainly suggests I think he is approaching a return. It's worth saying sometimes it's not just, does it hurt anymore? Is the injury healed? It's also kind of, especially with him, how fit are you essentially? Because, if you have an arm or a shoulder or something, you can still be running. You can still be getting your cardio in at earlier stages of your recovery. If you're nursing, I think we all probably assume this is like an ankle, foot, something based on kind of how he went down. If you're nursing that, you can't really get back to game level conditioning until you're healthy. And so I think the question for me is just kind of how far along is he, maybe not just in his recovery from the injury, but also just his progress back toward being game ready. Not that he's, been eating pizza and Doritos for the last month or whatever, but there's just a different speed that even a 6th-year guy is going to need to be tuned up for. And so I don't know that I'm quite positive he's going to play tonight, though. I would say that it seems like the general vibe is moving toward his return soon. And that's, as you said, with Big Ten play on the horizon restarting, that is coming none too soon for Indiana.
Yeah, I talked about that as I call it, game shape. There's a difference between being in shape and being in game shape, and that's not just cardio. It's taking the daily bumps and bruises that come with actively playing. You mentioned you can sit on a bike and get your cardio in, but there's a difference between running up and down the court and banging and with guys and just doing all the things that you actually do in the course of a game. So that's probably something he has. I don't know if he's been practicing at all. So, but
he's also missed. Definitely. I mean, he's missed a month of this team developing. I mean, he's missed a month of this team. Schematically, tactically, I don't know, X's and O's, however you want to put it. Coaches never intend for the team to be the same thing on November 1st that it is on March 1st. A team evolves, a team grows, a team develops as the season goes along. A coach starts entrusting guys with, more freedom in certain cases, or he starts installing more wrinkles in certain sets because it's, he feels his team has come far enough to learn it. And I mean, Xavier Johnson, again, he's a 6-year point guard. He's played for Tom Allen. He's played for Mike Woodson for 2.5 years now, I guess. So he's not a novice at this, but he has missed a month of time on the floor with his teammates, and he's going to have to catch up to this team a little bit as well. There's an inevitable piece of that you can't really replicate without doing it.
Yeah, and to your point, the team also will have to catch up to Xavier because they have gotten to a role where, coming off of the last game, Malik Renew knocking down those 3-pointers, the team knocking down 3-pointers, 12 in all in the win over North Alabama, but they've had to adjust as well because of his absence, and that'll be a change for them.
Yeah, I mean, again, it just like, and the thing about it is you cannot simulate any of this. You cannot, replicate any of this. Like it can only happen by doing. And so, just in any and every possible sense, Xavier Johnson's got to be caught up before he can get back on the floor. Now, if it's possible to get him back on the floor in a game like tonight, when the margin for error is a little bit wider and you should be able to win even through maybe some hiccups or him not playing a ton of minutes or whatever. Yeah, that's probably preferred. But if he's not ready in whatever sense, the worst thing to do is force it. So I think it's, again, I mean, I wouldn't be shocked if he plays tonight. On the other hand, I don't know that it's necessarily fait accompli. I wouldn't be surprised if, it's worth saying if they hold him back here, it's essentially another extra week of recovery. That's not an insignificant amount of time. So it wouldn't surprise me if maybe they just give him one more week. We'll see.
Yeah, it's something that has to be pondered by the staff. Of course, it probably just depends on where he is with his recovery right now. How beneficial has this been? It's hard to consider injuries beneficial, but it was beneficial last year for Jalen Hood-Schifino, and there has been benefit for Gabe Cupps this year, and to a degree to Trey Galloway as well in Xavier's absence. They have both had to step up in different ways.
Yeah, I mean, I would probably, time will tell. Obviously, I would probably say it, at least for the moment, it feels more important for Galloway. I think, I don't think he would ever say this. I don't think he'd ever blame anything on this, but I think we could all see Galloway was maybe not quite his best self earlier in the season. I don't know, was it trying to force too much? Was it embracing a larger role? Was it balancing the responsibilities of being a captain? I think he has really grown into a larger role in every sense. I think he's rebounding the ball a little bit better. Obviously, his assist numbers are really good. You can point to some of his scoring numbers, not least in the Kansas game. I don't think you're ever going to expect him to score 28 points a game, but and listen, sometimes I'll also totally admit, sometimes reporters will read stuff into this and it just turns out the guy had a bad ankle and it wasn't bad enough to not play, but he was fighting through it and now it's better. And, we can attach all kinds of meaning to things that don't really have much, but one way or another, I think it does feel like it has brought out gradually, the best in Trey Galloway. And if you can, strike that balance as Johnson comes back with between, sort of making sure that a 6-year point guard with all the creativity and influence that Johnson can wield is getting what he needs with, maybe an expanded impact from a player like Galloway, then that just makes you a better team. And I think, Cupps is important too. I think, the one thing I would say is I think Gabe Cupps had probably already proven a certain level of ability to hang defensively, in crunch time and key situations. I think you'd already kind of gotten a sense for what Gabe Cupps could do. And Mike Woodson himself has said, hey, I didn't necessarily intend to be playing this kid 36, 37 minutes a night as a freshman. That's a lot to give him in a short space of time. But I think he's handled it well. And now if you can get Xavier Johnson back, then suddenly your bench gets a little stronger too.
And the outlook for Indiana, we're been waiting to see because we don't know what the Big Ten is going to look like still. We know what Purdue is. We thought we knew what Michigan State was, but we had to readjust that. And then the rest of the league is still a big question mark.
Yeah, I think, for the moment anyway, if you're Indiana, obviously nobody should be worrying about the league. They should just be worrying about themselves. That kind of goes without saying. I do think from Indiana's perspective, you've gotten yourself off to a decent little start here, 2-0. You are in a maybe a better position than what your other non-conference results would have suggested in terms of the UConn game, the Auburn game, but being able to no matter kind of where those teams were when you played them, being able to get that 2-0 start against Maryland and at Michigan is really useful. And now I think if you're Indiana, you can't turn down any opportunity in the Big Ten. You haven't done anything really. I'm not trying to be overly critical, but you're not going to come out of the non-conference with anything particularly meaningful from a tournament perspective, other than a decent strength of schedule number. There's not going to be any quality wins there. Your best win is probably either going to be, Harvard or maybe Morehead State. That's obviously not much. You're going to have to do a lot of work in conference play to shore up your tournament resume. And that's certainly maybe taking the opportunity against a Purdue or an Ohio State. but it's also looking at a Nebraska on the road and saying, hey, this is still a quad one win. It's not the most impressive thing in the world, but Michigan's a quad one win on the road. Nebraska's a quad one win on the road. If you can find your way to, I'm trying to think of, other teams like in Illinois or somebody like that, and obviously Illinois has got a whole separate situation going on that we won't get into, but, there's got to be some quantity and some quality from Indiana in the Big Ten if it's going to do what it needs to do to get where it wants to go from a tournament perspective, because the league is not loaded this year. And so there's not really a game that Indiana can kind of turn its nose up at in the league this year and say, we don't have to take this one seriously, because it's going to need all the help it can get.
Yeah, and we don't have to jump ahead to well, I guess we do. Nebraska, when they do jump back into Big Ten play, that's on the road, and that is not going to be an easy game either. That used to be a win, kind of one of those games you'd think would kind of write down as a win, but Nebraska has played well enough that that's not a mindset you can go into Lincoln with now.
No. I mean, I think Nebraska is frankly probably in the same boat with Indiana, maybe even a little bit better situation. I think Nebraska has every right to legitimate NCAA tournament ambitions right now. Now, can they do what they need to do to get there? We'll see. I mean, that's, I don't think they're in if the season ended today, although I'll admit that I purposely tune out bracketology until about Valentine's Day, because it's all just so projectable until then. But Nebraska is also a great example of, and I'm sure Mike Woodson, if he were here, he'd say, well, we're not getting past Kennesaw State, whatever. But Nebraska is a great example of a game that Indiana's got to look at it and say, that's a good win, and if it's not going to go at the top of anybody's resume, probably, maybe, I mean, we'll see. But if you win away at Nebraska, 5 times this year, that's 5 quad one wins. And the committee's not going to say, they got to find 37 at-large teams. Like, the committee is not going to sit there and say, oh, well, some of these quad one wins are more impressive than others when they're considering whether they want to make you an 8 seed or a 7 seed or whatever. They're just going to say, yeah, your resume looks good. The quantity is there. And you're going to need some quality too if you're Indiana. Again, you don't really have much of either right now. You're going to need to put a couple big feathers in your cap, but you're also just going to need some, just like some sheer numbers. And Nebraska absolutely is kind of one of those.
A lot of recruits in town tonight. Brian is pointing out on the Indy Moore Honda hotline that especially with the students being out on Christmas break still, Liam McNeely included in one of those guys, but 2026 guard Jaden Johnson from Louisville, 2026 power forward Evan Harrell. Man, we're reaching out there. Is this kid? Was he a freshman in high school now? He's from Carmel, rather. So several guys, Brayton Mullins, in attendance tonight. So Indiana getting on to probably one of the last opportunities where you get to host a group of potential recruits.
Yeah, I don't know if it's one of the last opportunities, but I think you point out there, like, this is just a time when you can do that in bulk, and we saw that around the Kansas game too, obviously, and that's a different one a little bit because it's a high profile game, and it's a game you're going to want your recruits in town for, but it's also just when kids aren't in school, as long as they've got a gap in their high school schedules, which can be a little bit, kind of weave in and out as things go. That is the kind of game that you're going to want to bring some guys in, even if it's just on unofficial visits, to just kind of swing through and say hello and whatever else. It's the sort of recruiting visit, I guess the best way to put it maybe is that, I guess I'd be surprised if somebody's ready to commit off the back of Kennesaw State, but yeah, you bring them on a visit like that. It's just a little bit of extra work you're putting in that might make the difference down the line with a guy.
Well, and also it's who they're having them in with. Liam McNeely being in is probably going to get the attention of some of these younger guys that will be in at the same time.
Yeah, no, that's a good. I mean, that's a good point too. I mean, it never hurts to have a guy who's already in the fold, who's selling the thing, who believes in it, who will back it. Again, it's kind of the same thing. It's the gap in his schedule as well, and it never hurts to have that guy, maybe around a 5-star player, around younger guys that you're going to be targeting in 25 and 26, and you're going to be saying, hey, I'd like to, I'd like to take maybe a little bit longer look at this program that intrigued this guy so much. If it's good enough for him, if it's intriguing for him, then that maybe there's something I need to look at here too.